There was a lot going on in the Twitter sphere in May 2020, not least relating to the global pandemic. Meanwhile, in one corner of Twitter, away from the COVID front lines and the heated political debate it has sparked, this thread from a UK-based engineering lecture was published. Considering clickbait titles for our next paper, a thread. From there ensued 7 tweets, each featuring what the tweeter had identified as possible clickbait titles to head up their academic work. As we read through the examples offered, you'll start to notice a common theme. Each of the suggested titles seeks to pique our curiosity, whet our appetite and make us desire to know more. What will we not believe? What are the 5 ways? Why did researchers abandon all hope? And so on. Their structure and content, in other words, seek to bait us and ready us to, at some point, click through to reach the content the title would head up. But there is also something else interesting going on here. That is that these tweets are not to be taken at face value. The tone is more comical than serious. In fact, what they hint at in one fell swoop is the complexity of our information environment, how it is driven by the attention economy, that desire to grab and consume our time online, as I have explored elsewhere in relation to social media in particular. What we have here is a light-hearted commentary on a social reality we now have to deal with, a reality which is actually extremely serious. The development of an information environment which seeks to play with our emotions, desires and interests, often resulting in detrimental consequences for us and even society. It is a nod to what researchers and commentators are now referring to as information disorder. I'm speaking in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has been accompanied by what was termed by the Director General of the World Health Organization back in February 2020 an infodemic. Whenever and wherever you're watching this video or listening to this audio, I am sure you'll be able to think of moments of this information crisis. Moments in which you've been unsure as to whether you have been hearing and reading truth or falsity. I'm sure you will have come across the term fake news, a term which is now bandied about with relative ease and has itself become highly politicized. To take one example, US President Donald Trump willingly uses the term to label anything which he disagrees with or criticizes him. Here is not the place to go into all the ins and outs of the COVID-19 infodemic and indeed what it means for education. I've written at length about this elsewhere. Instead, with this experience or any knowledge of this experience you might have as a background, or indeed parallel infodemic infocrisis examples, I want to sketch out the information disorder landscape, give key pointers as to what it is, in order to move us beyond the imprecision that comes with the term fake news. The aim is to encourage us to start thinking about what we might do to overcome the challenge information disorder poses all of us, and has in fact always posed us and will continue to pose us even once this current pandemic is over. I would like to start with attempting to conceptualize what we might mean by information disorder. I'll then move to some definitions, with the caveat that, of course, social phenomena are not easily definable. Nevertheless, it is useful to have some, albeit loose, categories to work with. So, to start with conceptualization. We know that the World Wide Web has opened up access to swathes of information. I've spoken elsewhere of the information opportunity that we consequently enjoy. I have meanwhile also nodded to the challenge of the online world, including the work of bad actors who infiltrate social media websites and look to disrupt and corrupt the flow of enriching information. So, where does this notion of information disorder sit within all of this? There is no easy answer, but if we were to think of a spectrum between authoritative information, that is good information we can trust, learn from and be guided by at one end, with bad information at the other, we could probably say that information disorder covers most of the rest, whilst also taking in that bad end of the spectrum. As we shall see from our categories, poor information is not always that which is ostensibly bad, that which we know with absolute certainty, that which is wrong or damaging. More often than not, And this is why information disorder is so dangerous. Poor information lurks around that grey middle area. Worryingly, it also encompasses that information whose authority, i.e. bearing the marks of a trusted source, is just not clear. It is worth underlining at this point that we have always had grey middle areas. However, to come back to the theme I discuss elsewhere of the differences between our online and offline worlds, the difference here is that poor information, whatever shade it takes on, now has the capacity to reach more people than ever before, and at a greater speed than ever before. The founding vision of the World Wide Web has meanwhile inadvertently exacerbated the information challenge. Writing a short personal history of the World Wide Web in 1998, Tim Berners-Lee wrote the following: "The dream behind the web is of a common information space in which we communicate by sharing information. Its universality is essential. The fact that a hypertext link can point to anything, be it personal, local or global, be it draft or highly polished." The problem is that with the levelling of access source authority, which derives from information being reviewed, accepted and improved by experts working with integrity, honesty within their fields, has become harder and harder to discern and impossible to achieve, not least given the quickness with which we all put up information online. The good news is that there are a number of people and organisations around the world working on understanding our new information hazards and seeking to bring some sort of order in terms of understanding the exact challenge they pose. I should note here that much of this work has accelerated at the pace of knots since 2016 and the landmark elections in the US and UK, which saw extremely high levels of poor information shared online. I would like to briefly turn to the work of two researchers here. The first refers to a blog post published by education leader and expert Kari Kivinen. Writing in March 2020 to support homeschooled students in their search for reliable information, Kivinen pinpoints the following three categories for poor information: misinformation, that is, defective information or mistakes; disinformation, that is, deceptive information or hoaxes, a category which includes politically motivated information or propaganda; and malinformation, damaging information or gossip. Our second example is the work of Claire Wardle, who, at the time of speaking, leads strategy for the not-for-profit organisation First Draft News. In her latest work on information disorder, published at the end of 2019, she highlights the need to understand that since 2016, poor information has quickly grown to encompass a greater number of categories. Information disorder encompasses malinformation, disinformation, and misinformation, and the subcategories within these: propaganda, lies, conspiracies, rumours, hoaxes, hyper-partisan content, falsehoods, or manipulated media. Now, Wardle highlights, there are many more shades sitting in the malinformation category, a category which itself bleeds over into the disinformation category. She proposes 7 levels of content, which can be plotted on a scale ranging from low harm to high harm. Importantly, the attribution of harm level is determined by the content creator's intention and specifically their intention to harm. A further nod to the complexity of information disorder. At the highest level of harm sits fabricated content. To bring us back to where we started, at the other end of the scale sits satire or parody. Wardle writes at length on the controversial inclusion of satire parody, that is, that content which has no intention to cause harm but has potential to fool. The reasons for this are many, but includes the understanding that content posted humorously can quickly lose its initial harmless context. It can be shared and reshaped and soon take on the veneer of truth. Wardle also points out that satire has to be included to take in the shrewdness of bad actors now. Satire is hard to detect by computers, so has in some instances been weaponized as a subversive tool to sow the seeds of poor information. Information disorder is a fascinating, if bewildering and ultimately highly worrying reality. Elsewhere, I explore this further in relation to our roles as digital creators and consumers. For now, I want to labour that final point from Wardle. Technology is accelerating at a rate of knots. I have spoken elsewhere of the opportunities and challenges ushered in by the fourth industrial revolution, which has been brought about by this fast technological advancement. The paradox of information disorder is that whilst technology can breed and disseminate poor information, it remains a necessarily human skill to be able to navigate it. This human ability is a core part of becoming netizens, and in particular, responsible digital creators and consumers.